Welcome back in to David L. Gray, Off Code and Unscripted. Got one thing for you today. We're going to do a recap. We're going to really more like a part two of the video I made about there being CIA plants within the Catholic Church. In particular, there being CIA plants placed within Catholic social media to undermine the faith. This is a good time to do a part two of that video because of what recently happened in the Archdiocese in New York at St. Patrick's Cathedral with the skittles, the desecration, the sacrilege that they were involved with there. We have to answer the question, why is it? Whether it's at St. Patrick's Cathedral, whether it's in the Archdiocese in New York with a skittle there, Lori Lightfoot receiving Holy Communion, whether it's with Catholic Charities down the southern border, everything they're doing to destroy this country. Why is it that there always seems to be people placed at strategic positions, sometimes to do, sometimes failing to do the right thing? We need to talk about that. When it comes to like answering the question, I think Occam's razor is a good thing for us to pay attention to. Occam's razor is saying that sometimes that the most likely answer is the answer. And from my perspective, what I'm talking about here, they're being plants, whether it's the CIA, whether it's other organizations, they're being plants and there's operations within the Catholic Church to undermine the faith, to present these systems of doubt, to cause people to question what is true. The same thing that happened at the Garden of Eden. Did God really say that? It's the same systems of doubt that's been around since the beginning that we see more prevalent today. So we need to talk about that. So we're going to talk about one of the things that in the last video, I think there were a lot of people who didn't really get it. All right. And I think that's my fault as an educator. If people aren't getting it, that's on me. Perhaps I didn't set the whole thing up right. I think I went in with just assuming people knew what a plant was, assuming people knew what ops were. Some people didn't. This is the first time hearing about this. So some people cannot understand, well, how could a person who appears to be a great traditional faithful Catholic, how could that person be a plant? And someone like James Martin being a plant, how could that be true? Okay. And so what I didn't set up, what I didn't explain enough, or maybe not at all, was that people who are chosen or groomed as plants actually believe in a thing. That's why they're chosen. These are ideologues. They believe they'll die on a hill. These are the people that are groomed. These are the people that are planted. These people just don't know. Sometimes they're ignorant of the fact that what they're doing, that it is a participation in the objective of the op. Okay, it's sort of like terrorist cells. You can have independent cells operating in different places. No cell knows what the other one is doing, but each cell is participating in their own way in the mission of the entire operation. So I think one of the best ways I can explain this to you, and we're going to get into that, is called the principle or the idea of the double-headed eagle, something that I learned when I was a Freemason. Now, for over 10 years, I've been speaking about Freemasonry, my experience about Freemasonry, writing books, doing master classes, video after video about why Catholics cannot be Freemasons. So, one thing I've never done was explain something to you from Freemasonry, something I learned from Freemasonry, as if it were true. I'm going to do that today. Just because I think it's probably the best way I know to explain something to you. Again, that's the idea or the principle of the double-headed eagle. So we're going to get into that. And then some of you in that video, in the comment section, were saying, well, David, maybe you're plants. How come maybe we don't know if you're plants or not? And when people, suggest that to me, I oftentimes say, oh, look, every sentence you will ever hear me say that begins with the two words, the Jews, 100% of the time is negatively. All right. And that's one thing that if a person is a Secret Service plant, particularly, a CIA plant, one thing they don't do is speak negatively about the Jews. Right? That's like calling E. Michael Jones a plant or Kanye West a plant. Plants don't speak negatively about the Jews, but I have nothing positive to say about the Ashkenazi Jews. Right? Only thing like, may God have mercy on them. Right? That's the only thing positive, if that's positive, that I have to say. So, but I say that in jest a little bit. But we're going to talk about that because I didn't set the video up correctly. I didn't talk about my experience being groomed or looked at as a plant by communists in college. A weird interview that I had with the FBI, and later on, the grooming out experience as a Freemason. So we're going to talk about how do I know these things from my personal experience. I know a lot about these systems of doubt in plans and ops. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is a lot of you had questions in the comment section about, well, what about this person? What about that person? You wanted me to, based upon the criteria that I put forth, are they a plant or not? You're asking about Matt Fradd, Ryan Holdsworth, people like this. Are they not? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to use the same criteria. So if you have not watched the previous video, you probably should before you get into this one, because I'm not going to go over a lot of things that I talked about in that video. But in this video is really for a follow-up to the previous one. So I'm not even going to start the clock. I have some notes here. This is unscripted. I just have some notes here that I need to get through. So, but just looking at them, I know it's going to be longer than 10 minutes. But let's go ahead and get into it now. This is David O'Gray Show. Off code, unscripted. All right, so the double-headed eagle. Now, the double-headed eagle is something you've probably seen throughout history. If you studied Western civilization, you've seen the Roman Empire use it. You've seen the Byzantine Empire use it. You've seen the Prussians use it. You may be familiar with it when it comes to the ancient accepted Scottish rites in the 32nd and the 33rd degree. You may even be more familiar if you studied the subject a little bit. You may have noticed that the northern jurisdiction, the wings are down. The southern jurisdiction, the wings are up. And most people, countries, or jurisdictions around the world who are using the Scottish Rite, most of them are using the southern jurisdiction version of their order of degrees and their system. So they always have the eagle with the wings up. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. We're going to talk about not so much about the Scottish Rites or the Masonic orders or Freemasonry. And again, I have to throw this in there, as I oftentimes do, because I just recently heard Church Militant, one of the news broadcasts, talking about it when there was something about some cardinal or archbishop meeting with some Freemasons, right? And they said, oh, they're Freemasonic. Again, people, there's no such word as Freemasonic. Please stop. Anytime we use that word, Freemasons laugh, and it discredits us, saying we know. It proves that we don't know what we're talking about when we use Freemasonic. You don't. There's Freemasonry. There's Masonic orders. You don't combine the two words. That's not how words work. Okay. But yeah, and anytime, like I said in a previous video, anytime someone, these ruses come up, these red herrings or these Oklahoma shuffles, when people make you look this way so that you don't see what's going on over here, I think Freemasonry is one of those. I fundamentally believe that whenever you hear someone come along and talk about the boogeyman Freemasonry and causing people to be scared about the Freemasons who haven't been relevant since the communists, it's to take your eyes off the ball, right? And that's what it is. So I really don't. Again, it just happened with that meeting, right? But it's a good point, though. I think it's a good topic. I think it's something good to bring up, because it's again. I think that's really the double-headed eagle. Like, how can Pope Francis just recently say Catholics cannot be Freemasons to the bishops in the Philippines reaffirming church teaching, but over here you have this archbishop meeting with Freemasons? How can both of these things be happening, right? That's a great example of the double-headed eagle, and I'll come back to that. But about the principle itself and how the Scottish Rite is using the double-headed eagle. In Catholicism, signs and symbols point to a work that is being done by Jesus Christ. That's what signs and symbols point to. Whether it's the water at baptism, whether it's the chrism oil, these signs and these symbols that's related to the sacraments point to a work that is being done by God. Okay. That's different than how signs and symbols are used in Freemasonry and throughout the Masonic orders. In these systems, signs and symbols, whether it's a square and compass or a double-headed eagle, the signs point to a work that is being done or being done by man, or man is being called to do. So these are two things that are really antithetical to one another. One system of signs and symbols point to work that is being done by God. The other system has signs and symbols that are pointing to works that are being done by man. Now, if you're a Freemason and this is your first time, you haven't been a Freemason for a while, maybe you have been for a while, I may have just blown your mind, right? Because you didn't really know what signs and symbols are for. But that's the case. That's true. And if you're a Catholic hearing this, I hope you understand the distinction and how powerful that is. That in Freemasonry, the signs and symbols point to offensive works that are being done by man to bring about a system of disrupting the moral authority of the Catholic Church, to usher in a new age, a new world order, a new moral order that replaces and supplants Catholicism. And this is the work that had been done by Freemasons quite magnificently. The work of creating public schools, the work of creating a system where the government is in charge of, the Masonic idea. Pope Leo always blamed, and other popes always blamed the Freemasons for this idea of separation of church and state. Because they knew if the church was separated from the state, one, the church no longer had protection. The church could be easily attacked, but also the state can be used to attack the church, and people begin to look at the government as their object of worship. Okay, so the government comes in and they start creating weird things, such as funeral homes. You can be buried outside the church. These ideas of state weddings. The state decides whether who's married or who's divorced. Again, public education. So the idea that was promoted by Freemasons of separation of church and state, it points to the work that was being done by man as an offensive work against the church. And the way this was accomplished was through the principle of the double-headed eagle. That the eagle looks both ways, which means it has two lines of attack, both offensive. And so this is why, people ask the question, people who are kind of novices to the subject of Freemasonry, they would say, oh, Freemasons, they fought in the revolutions. They were in this revolution and that revolution, 1848 revolution, the American Revolution. The fact of the matter is that Freemasons are always on both sides of the revolution, whether it's the American Revolution, the Civil War, whatever. They're always on both sides of the revolution because it's the double-headed eagle. Both groups, both sides, both heads of the eagle accomplish the goal that is really to unify the body of the eagle, right? The eagle has one body, two heads. So it has one goal, one operation, but accomplishes it in two different ways. So this is why, we can look at Freemasonry and say, well, there's the Anglo, and there's the, principally the England, Ireland, Scotland, and then there's the continental Freemasons, the France, the Italy, the Grand Orient. They seem to have two different strategies, right? One is more interested in the law itself. That'd be the Anglo, writing America's Constitution and things like that, and leveraging that to undermine Christianity and the faith and Catholic Church. And then there's the Continentals. That's, they'll kidnap a pope, right? You have people like Mario Giuseppe, and just this outright seems to be more in your face. Some of the things that say Maximilian Kolbe saw, flags waving, Freemasons putting up monuments in the streets, right? This it's the double-headed eagle. The goal is to promote indifferentism, is to, again, to usher in the age of a new moral order in the world. And this is accomplished by the eagle looking two different ways. So two different operations that are that serve, that accomplish the same purpose that the body intends them to do. Right. So you have these competing directions, right? And then we could even look at the principle of double-headed eagle. We could say, well, in a northern jurisdiction, right, which I used to belong to, the eagle had his wings down. Now, in a southern jurisdiction, the wings are up. Why is this? All right. Are these two different eagles? Absolutely. One eagle was meant to die. One eagle is meant to sacrifice for the goal. Right. The other eagle, he'll fly above the fray and he'll survive. Right. So this is just an ideology. It's a philosophy, and it's also a principle. But again, as a symbol, the double-headed eagle it points to the work of man being done, the work that the Mason is being called to do. Okay. So that's the principle of the double-headed eagle, and how I think it um, relates to how is it that plants, you can have a plant of the CIA or some other secret service who actually believes in the thing that they're doing. They could be even a traditional faithful Catholic. And they could be planted, they could be groomed as an op to accomplish the goal of weakening the papacy, cause people to doubt what is true, cause people to leave the faith. But the principle overall is really just to weaken the Vatican, weaken the papacy. Because the Pope is the most dangerous leader in the world. The Vatican is the most powerful state in the world. But also how you can have on the other side, you can have someone who we call complete leftist, someone who's completely liberal, but maybe like James Martin, who actually believes in what they are doing, will die for it. The double-headed eagle. Both of these groups, both of them in their own way, whether it's promoting the scandals of the papacy or whether it is, we would say on this side, pouring flames on the scandals of the papacy, or this group putting ice on the scandals of the papacy, and then the papacy itself putting someone in there who's going to create scandal. All these things work together to accomplish the goal of weakening the faith, to cause people to doubt their faith, and cause people to look more to the government to solve their problems than the church in Christ Jesus. So this is what happens. You have a weak papacy that sins, that causes doubts, and we have, we say trads for now. We say, well, trads pour gas on the scandals, and leftists pour ice on them. Like I said, this all creates division. It creates weaknesses. One thing we're related to, right? If you look in America, you largely see one. I think there's an illusion. We can start with the illusion of there being, two parties, a two-party system. Right? I think that's largely true. We could say, except in perhaps maybe the culturally Black Americans that you find in the cities throughout America, especially with culturally Black women. For them, there's only one party. There's only been one party for a long time, ever since the Marxists came with the civil rights movements. People like Martin Luther King Jr. and his comrades in the march towards Marxism. Ever since then, blacks have been, some people point to it as being a communist operation. And Martin Luther King and Jr. and the people he had in his operation were known communists, and they were being funded by communists. And uh, people like John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy told Martin Luther King that these people were plants, that they were running a Marxist op. Martin Luther King didn't want to get rid of them. But but ever since that time, the culturally black Americans have been under the totalitarian rule of the communists. It's one of the most successful operations in the history of the world, creating in the culturally black Americans people that are completely um, loyal to one party, and that are dominated by it. Only thing the Marxists had to do from that point is really take over the Democratic Party, right? And that's what's been done. So in culturally black America, you just have one party, but and everyone knows that the Democrats, it's a complete rule of one group of people that we don't see anything else like this in the world. It's quite amazing. But for the rest of America, I think there's an illusion of there being a two-party system. But for those who see things more clearly, right? We see clearly there's just one uniparty. And what we see is the double-headed eagle. We see one eagle, we could call it the head of a Democrat, the other eagle the head of a Republican. They seem to be competing, looking two different ways, but they're not. One seems, oh, we're pro-life, we're against abortion, lie, right? We know that more now than ever. The other one seems to be they don't care about anything, right? They seem to be, and what's going on? You throw the media in there, right? They all they're doing is creating to this system of doubt, right? And they're causing division, they're causing strife. And what's going on is that they're really tearing down the system of trust, really, to usher in a new thing. Right? So once they destroy this thing, this idea that this ruse that's in place that you can go to the ballot booth and change your life, right? Once that whole thing is destroyed, once you no longer believe in that, a whole new thing is going to come to dominate everyone, right? So this is again the principle of the double-headed eagle. And you look at someone like Donald Trump, who is a disruption to the double-headed eagle, right? Now I'm not saying you have Democrats who are always pointing to the communists or Russia and saying, "Oh, this person is a Russian plant. This person is working for Putin." I'm not saying they're wrong. Sometimes they may be. They're pointing to Tucker Carlson or Trump or something like that. But just like the Democrats let Martin Luther King Jr. know who the communists were in this group. I think sometimes Democrats do know. But what I'm saying at this point in time, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is a better option for me. Okay, but there's always plans. There's always Secret Service operations, always running throughout the world. Nothing happens that's that's not engineered in this world on that level, right? We can call these people populist, but it's all engineered. I thought it was amazing, the principle of double-headed eagle. I always thought it was amazing. Again, going back to Martin Luther King Jr., how you had the Marxists and the Skittles working together to destroy the Black American community through civil rights. Right? I thought that was, I thought that was again one of the most amazing things that you can never point to in recent history. How the double-headed eagle worked so fast and so swiftly to create this this group of people in the United States that are completely dominated by one group. One-headed eagle was, being operated by blacks, people like Martin Luther King telling them, oh, yeah, Martin Luther King Jr. and those people like that, and Thurgood Marshall saying, oh, you gotta depend on the government to be your savior. Government is the answer. Welfare from the government is the answer. Integrating your schools so your children can be taught by the same people who we're telling you that you're a victim of. That's the answer. All right? That's one-headed eagle. Then the other-headed eagle is systematically creating systems of oppression of these people. Systematically creating systems of oppression for these people. And so these two-headed eagle work together magnificently to create a people that is so loyal to one group, right? And so we knew it was both people, both saying that we can save you and we're going to kill you because we know who the Democrats are. They were always the same people, yet they were able to play both sides of the coin. Again, that's the principle of the double-headed eagle. So my experience on this subject of being groomed to be a plant or running an op, I think there are 3 encounters I had, but I think there's some evidence there, and I'll briefly talk about them. One, when I was in college, I was a sophomore, I was becoming a Freemason at this time, and the group of men who were in what was called a class with me, we had to start we decided to start a group because we had to do some activities, community service activities. We had to raise money and things like that. And so we had, on campus, you had to have an organization to rent out spaces and things like that. So we started this organization and we decided to call it, some of us wanted it be called Straight Up. Another group of us wanted another name. So we combined the names. It was called Straight Up Progressive African Men's Society. So some people in the group, they were doing the fundraisers, the selling food and, car washes and stuff like that. Then the other group of us, we were doing things that I guess were progressive at that time. I didn't know I was progressive at that time, but I guess that's, I wouldn't even know what a progressive was back then. But we were doing things on campus that I guess we consider progressive. We were handing out flyers. We were doing informational sessions. We were holding lectures on Black history and things like that. So I was largely the leader of it. I was the one that was most aggressive, organizing and things like this. So a couple of the professors at the university, their history professors, took notice of the things that we were doing, some of the activities and that we were promoting on campus. And so they had a meeting with me. They said, hey, come to the office. We want to talk to you. And so I didn't know what this was about. And so they started talking to me about how happy they, what they see me doing. And they want to support me. And if there's anything they could do to help me, let them know. And so it was that type of conversation, right? They were kind of like feeling me out, but also letting me know that, hey, we're there. Hindsight, looking back now, knowing who these people are, knowing the type of university I went to, these men were clearly Marxists. They were clearly communists. And it felt a little bit like the meeting of people who saw Martin Luther King, right? And people like Bayard Rustin and these people who saw Martin Luther King. And they said, this is our guy, right? They saw someone who they could use and leverage. So again, the idea of a plant is someone who already believes in something. So they're not being groomed to believe in something. They already believe in something. And what they're being called into the op for, or what they're being leveraged for as a plant to be put somewhere, is to continue to do what they're doing. Because the people that's running ops say, oh, this person, what he's doing can contribute to the mission of the whole. Whether what side of the headed ego it is, they can contribute to that. All right. So that's one thing I took notice of in hindsight, man, these professors were keeping their eye on me, always checking in with me to see, hey, maybe, you know, um, that didn't pan out. For some reason, I'll speak about it in a second. And then around that same time, I think after I became a Freemason, I was called into the career office for an interview. An interview I didn't sign up for. In an interview where I was the only person being interviewed. There was no one before me. There was no one after me. It was with the FBI. So there was this older gentleman in there. He just sat there really confident with his legs crossed, to the side, just looking at me. No notes or anything like that, which is weird, right? And so, just speaking with me. And then this so-called interview ended with him sliding me something. It was some information or something about some sort of internship, right? And he thinks I'd be a really good candidate. He tells me, well, your grades aren't really what everyone else's are, but I think you really have what we're looking for, right? Again, looking back now at that encounter, I just think it was so strange. The the person himself, I was the only one there. I was the only one being interviewed at this university with plenty of people. So yeah, again, I didn't follow up with that one either. All right, and then of course, you've been around. You've probably heard me talk about my experience in Freemasonry. How quite early on I was identified as someone who could be someone who fits. Right, I fit the profile. I became a fast mover. People took a hold of me and just moved me up to different ranks and different degrees. And, I began to being the youngest worship master of a lodge, the youngest district deputy. I was just on a fast track to become what some people would say, oh, people were just searching. Oh, Dave was going to be a grand something one day, right? My plan was to become a grand master, but people had higher goals for me. And it's and I wanted to be groomed, for that. And whatever they wanted me to do. My problem, though, I think, and I hit it well when I was a Freemason from people, but um, plants and ops, what they look for are people who, let's say, the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs, if you ever taken it, the Myers-Briggs has 4 categories, right? You're either extrovert or introvert. You're either a sensing person or you have intuition. If you're sensing, you're a person who you're focused on concrete details. You're practical. You're focused on the present moment. If you live by intuition, you're imaginative, like theologians are. You're future oriented. You see patterns and possibility, right? You probably know, I'm an I just by saying that. Then there's the category you're either thinking or you're feeling. Thinkers make decisions based on logic, reason, objective analysis, and principles. But feelers, they're more into the emotions. They really believe in values. They're really principled people. They want harmony. And then there's the last category of either a judger or you're a perceiver. Judges prefer people who have the judge criteria in that category. They prefer structure, they prefer planning, they prefer closure, right? Perceivers are more adaptable, they're spontaneous, right? They can kind of do whatever, right? They're open to the new experience. For people who are being looked at for it to be plants or to run ops for the Secret Service, these people definitely, ideally, they need to be in um, a E. They need to be an extrovert. They need to be sensing. They need to be feeling, and they need to be perceiving. They need to be a E, S, F, P, ESFP. That's your ideal Myers-Briggs score for an amazing plants or somebody to run an op. Right? Things that will eliminate you, like they eliminated me, were thinkers. People who makes decisions based upon reason and logic, not a whole lot of feeling. And also people who are judgers. They tend to be moral, right? They like structure. So they tend to be eliminated as well as people who are imaginative. They're eliminated. Introverts like myself, they're largely eliminated as well. There's some flexibility there, but I had no score on the Myers-Briggs that will really make me adaptable to being a successful Secret Service plant or running an op, especially the T and the J. I was eliminated from the onset. So no, I don't. I have some experience. That's why I know a lot of things. Some of the things I mentioned and some others about how this whole thing runs. But I was the never a good candidate for to those things. And in Freemasonry, when I was a Freemason, I was really just submarining until I became a Grand Master. And I think I submarine really well. I rose really high at running in a submarine. But outside of that, in these things where they're feeling you out, they're interviewing you, to see if you fit. No, I eliminated myself just because I don't have the characteristics. Now, for some of the names you guys had asked me, you asked me about Matt Fradd, you asked me about Trent Horn, Father Mike Schmitz, the Papal Posse over on Raymond Royal's show. You asked me about Brian Holdsworth. You asked me about Jimmy Akin, Father Charles Murr, and the guys on the RTF rundown. All right, so let's run through those. So let me remind you my criteria of determining whether someone is a CIA or Secret Service op or not. One, I'm looking at their background. How did they come to be? Was it organic or did they buy their way into our notice? Do they tend to be off code and unscripted? Again, we can relate this to the Myers-Briggs. Are they are the people who are thinking, are they feeling, are they judging, are they perceiving? We can do it more like that. That's what I was talking about when I'm talking about off code and script, right? People who follow the script are people who fit the Myers-Briggs, the ESFP, right? People who just speak the truth, who don't care about camps, who don't care about cults, who don't care about people unsubbing from you. Those are people who could not be plants, but people who are always saying what you want them to say and tickling your ears and affirming you and validating you and your fears to keep you divided and all that stuff. Those are the people who are on code, on script. It's just rinse, repeat everything they do. The third criteria was the network they're associated with, right? Are they already associated with a CIA op? Like EWTN, like United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, like Catholic Charities. Again, are they divisive? Do they seem to be promoting the idea of the double-headed eagle, right? The double-headed eagle just wants to weaken the papacy, right? And do things that are divisive so that they can create this new world of moral order, right? That's greater than what Christ and his church is offering. So, my scores are 1, very unlikely, 2 likely, 3 very likely. So let's run them down real quick. I'm going to put Matt Fradd at somewhere around a 2, I want to say 1.5. He is associated with a university that I once attended, Steubenville, Franciscan University of Steubenville, or Steubenville Franciscan, whatever it's called, I forget. He's associated with that, right? It seems to be a place that is continuing to get weaker and weaker. There's some sort of operation that's going there to weaken it. So he is associated with that. There is, when some years ago, people had always been trying to get me on these TV shows, whether it's like Journey Home or this Matt Fradd show. You guys, the people who like me say, oh, EWTN, you got to have David on Journey Home or Matt Fradd. A lot of people had tried to get me on certain shows. Not that I asked for it. You guys thought I had something to say and say, hey, you should have, like you guys come to me and say, hey, you should interview this person. I guess this is what happens. So there are people who were trying to get me on Matt Fradd for whatever reason, and Matt Fradd was dogmatically no about it. So I've always been suspicious about that. Again, one of my rules is that CIA ops and plants, they do not have people like me on their program. All right, I'm too free. Right? So I've always been suspicious, but my gut is really telling me about Matt Fradd that I think he's a genuine dude. We may not always agree with him, But I kind of see a guy, the silly cigar thing is silly to me. It's a meme. There's something I just don't, I think is weird. But he seems to me to be a dude who um seems to be, he wants to have a pure heart, I think, right? He seems to be a guy that's interested in Beatitudes. I see him trying, I see him efforting, right? So I'm going to rank him low. I think he's just, I think he's probably a good guy. Trent Horn, yeah, he works for a CIA op, Catholic Answers, right? We can throw Jimmy Akin in there with that as well. I don't think I'll rank them low as well. Probably right around. I got Matt Fradd at 1.52. So I don't think they're ops. I mean, I don't think they're plants, but I do think they work for ops. Father Mike Schmitz, I'm gonna put him. He works for what is probably being leveraged as an op, right? Our Sunday visitor, maybe, but I have them low. I don't have them anywhere as high as EWTN. I have EWTN probably at a 10. So I have our Sunday visitor, or Ascension Press, rather, whoever was one, same thing to me. I have them, mid-grade, likely. So he may be someone who works for a likely op, but he's less likely to be a plant than they are. The Papal Posse on EWTN and op with Raymond Royal, plant. He appears out of nowhere. He's plants all day. He works for two plants, EWTN and Fox News. He's a planter's plant, right? He's all over the Myers-Briggs, right? I will score him all these. He's ESFP all day, right? And so they're with him. I think the priest there, forget his name. I can't. I'm not even going to go there, right? He says he's some Gerald Murray or something like that. He says the dumbest things. If anyone's a plant, it's him, right? Who's other than the Papal Posse who appears there? Dr. Peter Kwasniewski. I don't think he's, maybe. I'm going to rank all those guys above 2, all right? Everyone's above 2. They're over likely. Just because they're close association with a plant, and because they're closely associated with a plant, which means they've been groomed, okay? Brian Holdsworth, he was on my Return to the Sacred series. I said everyone in that series I wouldn't have higher than a 1.5, right? The highest one I have on a show was Michael Hitchborn, right? I have him maybe at 1.5, maybe 2. But no, Brian Holdsworth, I don't think he's a plant at all. There's nothing there that indicates to me that he is. So I'm going to have him under a 2. So Father Charles Murr, let me make sure I have all my equipment here so I can emphasize for you why I have Father Charles Murr graded so high. I have him at a 3 on my scale. It's very likely that he is a plant. Again, I may not be 100% right about everyone, but I'm not 100% wrong about everyone either, right? But on my scale, based on my criteria, I have him graded really high, and this is why. And, by the way, I have an interview with Father Charles Murr here on my channel. One of my favorite interviews. I think he has a phenomenal vacation story. And like I said about some of these plants, some of these people in these ops, they may be decent people, good guys, faithful Catholics, right? They just may be getting used by the double-headed ego in operation, which contributes to the overall goal of weakening the Vatican. So some of my red flags that went off with Father Charles Murr, if you've been following along in this video, the previous video, and kind of what I've been saying for the last few years, anytime someone is pointing to Freemasonry as being the biggest problem in the church, all right, bing, 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 a huge red flag, alarms, my radar just goes off, because I know Freemasonry has not been in the top 10 of the threats against the Catholic Church in over a century. So when I see people saying, oh, there's Freemasons, a Freemason boogeyman, whoa, this is a red flag for me. It's kind of like Bruce Willis in Lucky Number 7. He's talking about the Kansas City Shuffle again, where they get you to look this way when you should have been looking this way all along. Right. It's kind of like when the whole Black Lives Matter riots were going on, they kept wanting us to focus on, like, these other issues, right? These ancillary issues that were um, not even close to what we should have been focusing on. The question was, who put the bricks in the middle of the city? Where did that pile of bricks come from? Right? How did these people have a pile of bricks? And who put them there? Why didn't a Planned Parenthood burn down? Why, if all in all the cities they were rioting and throwing bricks, where did the bricks come from? And why was not one Planned Parenthood burnt down? In all these neighborhoods they were setting on fire, there was a Planned Parenthood. So there was just some questions that we weren't supposed. Just look this way, people, just once, and look at the facts of the case. But no, we weren't allowed to do that. We had to look over here. This is what Bruce Willis and Lucky Number 7 called the Kansas City Shuffle, right? And that's the case with Freemasonry. We're talking about some of the biggest issues in the church, the Skittles. This stuff hasn't been in synodal documents. There's not been one synodal document where someone said, the Pope said, hey, we should really talk about bringing Freemasons in the Catholic Church. No, it was all about the Skittles. Let's make the tent bigger for them. Let's reach out to them. Okay, that's or the people who the Pope is meeting with: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, China. Okay, all these evil forces that we know are operating within the Catholic Church are bigger issues than, than the Freemasons. The Freemasons did their damage, like I talked about with separation of church and state and everything that came with it. They did their damage and it can't be undone, right? But that's not the biggest issue that's going on in the church today. So anytime someone's pointing that way, bing, 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 Kansas City Shuffle for me. So that's a huge red flag. And some people, I know this person, one of the Hounds of Heaven, one of our friends in the comment box had talked about, well, David, what about the Marxists? It has to be Freemasons because Freemasonry and Marxism. No, it's when Marxists and communists come online, Freemasons are the ones in power. So they've always been just natural enemies to one another. Marxists and communists have always been the predators of Freemasons, the prey. They've done evil things to them, burnt them, kicked them out of countries, put them in prison. They've always been natural enemies. The only place they've ever gotten along was Cuba, because they had an alliance because the Catholic Church. They were to get together against the Catholic Church. But it's these Marxists and Freemasons. Here, some people. There's one Catholic guy, I don't know who it is. He talks about, I think it's Timothy Gordon. He talks about Marxist Freemasonry. These people, they'll put any two words together, like Freemasonic, and just come up with stuff. No, two completely different things. Freemasons are very family oriented, by the way. This is why you have so many youth groups within the Freemasons. You have the Demolay, the Order of Pythagoreans, and Girls Assembly, Job's Daughters, Rainbow Girls. Then you have the women organization, or the associations for the wives. You have the Eastern Star, the Amaranth, the Golden Circle. You have all these different things for the family. The Freemasons have always been about the family. Leo the 13th talks about this. They said he wants to bring the whole family. They want to bring the whole family in. And this is why Freemasonry has always made it about the family. It's a family affair. It's a different type of family than what we Catholics believe in. It's not even the type of family you want your family associated with. But it's all about the family for them. You'll hardly ever see a Grand Master or a high-ranking Masonic official who does not have a wife and a family. They're all about the family. Marxists, on the other hand, are anti-family. They're out for the destruction of the nuclear family. Because they want the village to raise a child. They want your child to belong to the state. So these are two different ideas. They may be two heads of the eagle. They could be. I'm not denying that, but to say that one comes from the other is quite silly. Okay. So that's the first red flag. Father Murr is always pointing to the Freemasons, not so much in his book, The 33 Degrees thing. I thought that was a decent memoir, but in his interviews, he says the weirdest things about Freemasonry, things that are typically not true. and it's always pointing the finger, right? The Kansas City Shuffle. So that's the first red flag. The second red flag with Father Charles Murr is that he seems to come out of nowhere, at least for me. Right? I had never heard of him before this book, 33 Degrees of Murder or something like that. So you may have. Let me know if you have. I hadn't. So for me, he seems to come out of nowhere. And again, that's one of those, my criteria, right? Is he organic? Had we always known him? Had he always been around? Had he always been doing this thing? Or does he appear out of nowhere doing this thing, right? With money backing him. It seems to be like, kind of like, I can name a lot of people, right? They just poof, like poof, out of nowhere. And now they're in our lives, right? Where did they come from? Who's backing them? We have some questions. So that's, in and of itself, it's not a thing. But all these indicators, these points, the criteria, these red flags, the more of them you have, well, the higher score that I'm going to give you. And the third one that is a really red flag for me that makes me really say likely is the points about his clerics. Right, he wears in all the interviews, in an interview he did with me. At the time, I didn't know about this, but he had been forbidden from the Archdiocese of New York, I think in the early 2000s, from wearing his clerics. He's forbidden. He's not allowed to wear them. Yet he wears them. From his perspective, I understand that he thinks that the ruling or the decision was unjust, and that he has some sort of right to do what he's been forbidden to do. Right? That's his call, not mine. Only thing I know is that the Archdiocese said he cannot, yet he does. So to me, that's one of those things that is like a meme to me. Someone who is presenting himself as something that he is not, so that we may think that they're more credible. Okay. It's sort of like, these trads always wanting to smoke cigars and twist their mustache and all this stuff. That's a meme to me. That's not even real. Sitting around smoking cigars, talking trad stuff. That's like a joke. It's not even real. It's a meme. But that's supposed to convey the image. Oh, I'm a traditional person. I have traditional values because I'm smoking a cigar and twisting my mustache. That's not even real. And Father Charles Murray wearing clerics is not real because he's forbidden to wear them. He can't go to New York, Archdiocese of New York, and wear those clerics and present himself to the bishop there. No, he's forbidden. So it's not real. Okay. So those three red flags: the Kansas City Shuffle pointing to Freemasonry, two, seems to poof come out of nowhere, and three, he's wearing his clerics. So for that reason, I have him at very likely. Very likely. In this criteria, I think I said, 1, 2, 3. I think in the last video I said 1, 3, 5, but it's the same point. Very likely is unlikely, likely, very likely is the scale. I have him at very likely for these reasons. Could be completely wrong, but the red flags are the red flags. The guys on RT have run down to Mike Parrott, those whole things. I think if Mike Parrott was an op, his life wouldn't turned out. I think he had been more protected from what Church Militant did from him, right? Signs that you're in a CIA plant's an op. Again, this is something I know from experience. This is someone who's being groomed. It's someone who, had, some grooming, some plant interest. I think I was very protected at some times in my life, and I took advantage of that, and I ran out of gas, right? But even after that, I found myself to be, up until a point, pretty protected. Right, things kind of worked out how they shouldn't have worked out. So I don't know. I could be a plant, honestly, but I'm just kidding. I don't see how I could, things that I do contribute to the mission of the whole. But yeah, I think if Mike Parrott was a plant, yeah, I don't think that would have turned out that way. So I'm gonna put him really low. But that's in the show. Got to get it here. Appreciate your time, and I will see you next time. Remember, Jesus loves you and is there for you. Nothing I've said in these videos about CIA plans affects anything about your salvation or your call to be holy. This is just information for you to know. The fact that it matters that Operation Mockingbird is real. That the CIA, the Secret Service, have never stopped trying to influence us through programming, television programming, or social media. It's ignorant and stupid to think that somehow they're all up and down media and social media, but somehow they left Catholic social media. They say, "Oh, we're not going to go there." That's dumb and that's stupid to think. They're in Catholic social media. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of who. I'm not saying that the people I mentioned are. I'm not 100% on everyone, but I'm not 100% wrong about everything. So so there are operations that get us to question, to doubt our faith, right? But for you, so your job is to continue to be holy. Live the Beatitudes, live a liturgical life. This is for informational purposes for you to know that the devil is prowling around like a lion, looking for someone to devour. Don't let it be you. God bless.